Hey, what's going on everybody, and a warm welcome back to the Whiskey Cove. And on today's episode, we have the Maker's Mark Limited Editions Championship Round. Run that video. Alright then folks, as we already said in the intro, this is the championship round. There's already been a part 1 and 2, so if you haven't seen that, go and check in the description and then you can see those parts and watch them first. So, spoiler alert, the 4 that made it through to the final are going to be 2022 BRT02, and then we have the 2019 RC6, we have the Maker's Mark Cask Strength, and then we have the FAE01. So in round 1, it was the FAE01 that won it, and then it was the RC619 that came second. And then in round 2, the Maker's Mark Cask Strength won it, and then the BRT02 came in second. So these are the bottles that we have today, and let's see what is the one that comes out on top. We're gonna get these whiskeys into glasses and then we're gonna get this tasting underway. Okay folks, and we are back. So we have them into glasses. They look like pretty good pours. I have no idea which one's which. This will go from your left to your right. So this will be glass 1, 2, 3, and 4. So let's go ahead and get into glass number 1. Straight off the bat, I'm getting like a wheat note, a little bit of toffee there as well. Maybe a touch of apple. Tastes a little bit thin on the nose actually. A little bit surprised by that. But there's just a really nice little bit of sweetness there as well. Like I said, more of a toffee sweetness. And then the spice I'm getting is definitely like some bacon spices on this one. You definitely get a little bit of that cinnamon coming through and kind of a little bit of nutmeg there as well. Let's go in for a taste, glass number 1. So on glass number 1, you get this really nice like sugar cane sweetness on the palate there. And it does drink fairly warm. You do get that Kentucky hug that kind of travels down your throat there. It also kicks up some of that spice as well. I'm tasting like a little bit of tobacco spice. I'm also getting a little bit like of dried fruits on this one. So you can imagine like maybe like a fig or a raisin, those sort of dried fruits. That's coming through quite nice, and it's also adding to kind of like that sugarcane sweetness there as well. Really solid start from glass number 1. Let's reset our palate and then go into glass number 2. So this tastes so much more like caramel, maple syrupy sweetness. Is like the major first note that I'm getting here. Maybe a touch of like banana bread as well. There's definitely a banana note in there as well, and almost like a pastry note, which is why I'm getting that banana bread note. Maybe a touch of bubble gum there as well. This is very mapley, sweet, caramelly forward. A very inviting nose. Let's go in for a taste on glass 2. So what really stands out for glass 2 has a really thick and viscous mouthfeel. Again, that sweetness, that kind of maple syrup caramel sweetness, just lasts an eternity in your mouth. It goes from the front of the palate, which it kind of explodes there, and then it travels right the way through even to the finish. Even about 10 to 15 seconds after the finish, you're still getting the sweet notes coming through. You are still getting a touch of like rye spice there as well, and kind of like a peppercorn. I would say like a black peppercorn note there as well. So you do get like more of like a hot spice that comes from that, not from the alcohol ABV. Let's go in for one more taste here. So on glass 2, it's just all about that sweetness. Very sweet, dessert-like whiskey. You do get some like other wheat kind of grain notes that come through a little bit there as well. Kind of like a bran flake note, but it's a very pleasant whiskey, I'll give it that much. Let's go into glass number 3 here. Okay, this one is not as sweet as the second one was. I'm getting more of like a leather note on the nose. Maybe some dark fruits there as well. I'm thinking like a blackberry or maybe a blackcurrant, if you know what that is. There's this thing we have in the UK, back home in the UK, called squash, and basically it's like a water enhancer. It comes in a big bottle, and you just pour like a little bit into water, and then you drink it. It's kind of like a Crystal Light, but in liquid form. And this one called Ribena, it's a blackcurrant flavour. Kind of reminds me of that note. You have like sweetness, which isn't as sweet as the second one, but it still is sweet, because most bourbons are normally sweet on the nose. But then you have this like really like dark fruit, black currant note coming through with that leather that leather note there as well. And then a beautiful bit of vanilla that comes through. Really interesting. This is quite a complex nose on this one. Let's go in for a taste. So on the palate on this one, I'm getting a lot of wood presence. That leather's come through as well. Even though I had a little bit of it was a touch of sweetness on the palate. This was much more of a dry whiskey. I think just coming off the coattails or the back of number 2, it's just kind of put glass 3 in the context of just maybe how dry that this is compared to that one. I do still get some of those dark fruits that kind of carry through to the palate there as well. And then there is a little bit of kind of, again, like a wheat grain note. I know I repeated myself, but it does have wheat in the mash bill. And then also getting more of like a toasted burnt bread note there right at the finish. It's a very nice whiskey. It's got a lot of different notes going for it as well. Maybe when we go back through them and try them a little bit, we can pull out some of those other notes there. So that was glass number 3, and that just leaves last glass, which is glass number 4. So let's go into it for a nose on glass 4 here. That kind of Fuji apple and like a pink lady or pink delicious kind of comes back through to this. I think we had some apple on the first one. Didn't really have it on these two, but it's coming back a little bit here on the last one. And when I say like an apple, you can go online and look at like an apple chart. There's actually an array of different apples, and it starts off sweet and it ends kind of a bitter, not bitter, but like a tart. So like a Granny Smith is the most tart, and I think it's like a Fuji or a Pink Delicious or something like that around that area is like the sweetest. So when you bite into these apples, they give off very different flavors and kind of nose and notes. So that's why when I say an apple, I try to describe what that apple is as best as I can, because if I say a Granny Smith, it's going to be like a really tartar note, or if I say like a Fuji apple, then it's going to be more of like a sweeter apple note. And this is more of a sweeter apple note with this one. You do get the vanilla there as well, kind of like a vanilla bean vanilla. Like if you ever use vanilla bean for cooking, you kind of like crack it, kind of giving off some of those aromas. And then a beautiful barrel char note there as well. This one and the second one probably are the ones who give off the most barrel char notes here as well. I think these all come in around about 55, 56 ABV. So you're going to get a lot of barrel char notes from them. This is glass 4, let's go in for a taste. So with glass 4, it's definitely drinking with very little spice or very little heat. It's very easy to drink. Like I said before, these are all within 1 or 2% ABV, but it drinks a lot less hot than maybe some of the other ones. Not that they're necessarily drunk hot, but this is definitely more approachable. And some of those notes kind of combine with it. Like I'm not getting any rye spice, I'm not getting any bacon spices. I'm getting like a touch of like oak spice there as well, but that's not really burning or taking over my mouth. It's more of like an oak tannin spice. So it's more of a drier note, and that's more of the back end there as well. And some of the other kind of notes that I'm getting from this, especially on the palate, maybe like a touch of peanut, like a touch of peanut butter there is going on the palate. Yeah, maybe like a touch of like a caramel peanut brittle is definitely going on with this one. Really interesting whiskey. All of these bourbons have been just really, they taste pretty different from each other, and that's because we have a very different lineup. You know, we have a lot of different whiskeys. Well, we don't have a lot of different whiskeys. We have a lot of different Maker's Mark expressions here from different years. We were quite fortunate that that's how the championship bracket kind of worked itself out. So what we'll do is we will go back through these, we'll taste them a couple more times, and then we'll come back and then we'll get them in an order for you folks at home. Alrighty then folks, then with much deliberation we now have them in an order, and I'm laughing because one of them was just phenomenal. When I went back to it, the nose just kind of erupted. Anyhow, let's get into some of these results, shall we? So coming in at 4th place in the championship bracket for the special release Maker's Mark, and that is going to be glass 1. I just felt like this one fell a little bit short. I didn't think it had too much of a finish. It wasn't too much going on. It had some nice notes there in the beginning, but compared to the other three, it just fell a little bit short. So that is going to be A for Alpha, which is, here we go. So A for Alpha, and coming in at 4th place is going to be, it's going to be FAE01. So even though it won its bracket coming into the final, it finishes in 4th, which is really interesting to see because it kind of lost out to RC619, which came in 2nd. So, you know, maybe where it is, the order and what other whiskies it's up against can potentially have a kind of bearing on where it finishes in the championship bracket, and we saw that today. So this is 4th place. So 3rd place is going to be Glass 2, which is C for Charlie, and that is RC6 2019. So these guys switched. Again, you know, I thought this was a solid whiskey. I think this was really close between glass 4 and 3. However, ultimately, after trying them a couple of different times, I just kind of went for this one, as this kind of like had a little bit too much spice for kind of what my palate likes compared to glass 1. It wasn't a spicy whiskey, but just compared to glass 1, that's kind of how I chose them. So RC6 2019 comes in 3rd. So what comes in 2nd, and then ultimately what comes in at number 1. So number 2, that was glass 4, and that was B for Bravo. What is B for Bravo? That is going to be Maker's Mark Cast Strength. So that was a bit of a dark horse because it also won its bracket, and when these two went off the board, I was like, Maker's Mark Cast Strength is going to win this whole thing, which would be not funny, but it would have been really cool because this is really easy, not easy bottle to find, but a fairly easy bottle to find compared to the others. However, I thought this was a great whiskey. Like I said, these two could have possibly been interchangeable on a different day, but ultimately this held up and took 2nd place, which means the best whiskey of the Maker's Mark limited edition releases is going to be the newest release of this lineup, and that is the 2022 BRT02. And that is a bit of a surprise, if I'm completely honest. Yes, I haven't tried that whiskey before, and this was the first time during this competition that I got to try that. But who would have guessed? It was the last whiskey that Maker's Mark brought out, and it was the last one of the whole lineup because it was the BRT02 from this year. If you remember the BRT01 from the first part, or the second part, came really close to this, and this ultimately came through a 2nd place. So it's actually quite surprising that ultimately that this was the one that won the whole thing. However, sometimes things just work out that way. So if you want to go for a Maker's Mark specialty release, guys, go for the BRT02, because as you saw here today, it ultimately won the whole thing. And the notes, when I went back to this glass, again, it's just like full of toffee, full of kind of like this golden syrup. It's so syrupy and so dessert forward. It's just a beautiful, beautiful whiskey. But however, for today, BRT02 was the champion, and it reigns supreme over the rest of the limited releases. So hope you all enjoyed the whole series, the 3-part series out there, folks. If you did, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And as we say around here, as we drink through the world's whiskies, one glass at a time, BRT02 Maker's Mark is the one to choose. Cheers.